Farage and reform will only be defeated by achievement in government, practical things that people can see to be beneficial, like cutting the waiting lists and developing the health services.
Do you think he's dangerous? Some Labour MPs have described him as a dangerous figure. Do you think he's dangerous?
He's dangerous in the sense that he offers illusions. And so what might ring a bell in headline terms turns to ashes the moment that it's matched against reality.
Neil, welcome back. Neil Kinnock,
Nice
back
to
to
be
the
here.
newsagent studio. For this very specific reason, which is, as I say, it's 40 years on from that speech, which has become perhaps the most famous speech, certainly one of the most famous political speeches in the modern age, certainly the most famous conference speech, I think. Does it feel like yesterday?
Sometimes it does, though thank God it wasn't. But it's very, very difficult to think of it in terms of 4 decades.
40 years.
Because you wonder what's happened in the intervening period.
There are going to be loads and loads of listeners to this who don't remember. I mean, I wasn't alive. I'm very familiar with the events, obviously. Read lots about it, watched the speech many times. Can you just give a sense of the kind of background to it in the years before? For a start, could you just explain what militant was?
I'll try to. From the 1960s, under the guidance of a man called Ted Grant, who was a South African, formerly a member of the South African Communist Party, but someone who embraced the idea of Trotskyism, the teaching and ideology of Lev Bronstein, whose revolutionary name was Leon Trotsky. And
one of the great figures of the Russian Revolution.
He founded the Red Army. And it turned out that he was a strategic genius. But he was much too assertive and prominent, so that after Lenin died in 1921, the leadership of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union under Stalin decided that he was an enemy of the revolution and he had to flee. He was murdered in Mexico City. People who embrace his ideology consider that the future of the proletariat lies with permanent revolution that will secure utter transformation in all the economic and political relationships. For Ted Grant, that meant, when he moved to Britain, that the best way to develop the changes that he supported as an outfit called, I think I remember, the Revolutionary Socialist League, was to infiltrate the Labour Party.
To basically infiltrate it, take it over, and then make it a radical revolutionary
for the very simple reason that the Labour Party was by far the largest mass party capable of representing the industrial working class.
Yeah.
So that policy of infiltration, of entrism, which was the tactic they adopted, became more developed. They were never a very big organization, though there was a time by the late 70s, early 80s, where they had probably 1,000 full-time employees, some of them devoted to selling their weekly newspaper, Militant, and others dedicated to organization.
So Militant was initially the name of their newspaper, but they were basically a secret organisation.
Yes, well, covered certainly, because they operated at 2 levels. The one was as a newspaper that tried to sell itself and its ideas inside the labour movement broadly, trade unions and the Labour Party, and what would generally be thought of the left-inclined part of the general population.
And what did they want?
They wanted nationalisation of the top 50 corporations. They said monopolies, but corporations. A living wage that was roughly double what the average income was. And if effectively the secret, yeah, the sequestering, the takeover of much private property.
So they were this secret or semi-secret organisation. They were dedicated to entryism, to taking over the Labour
Yes.
Party, on the ultra left of the party. But they weren't just, they weren't just a sort of tiny, small kind of sort of outfit, as there have been so many kind of through the history of the Labour
Yes,
Party.
yes.
By the time you get to the early 80s, when your leader, after 1983, the 1983 general election, they have an MP, or they have a couple of MPs, and they have basically taken over Liverpool City Council.
Yes.
Why were they so strong in Liverpool?
Well, they had decided, because of a Liverpudlian guy called Peter Taff, very bright, very persuasive, was a dedicated supporter of Ted Grant and the Revolutionary Socialist League. They developed their organisation, particularly in Liverpool. They were headquartered in London, but they developed particularly in Liverpool, which is a city, a swirling city, a port city with a racetrack, with all of the effects of deindustrialization on a very rapid and gigantic scale. So people were rightly, justifiably, utterly brassed off with the existing order.
And you have the Thatcher government, which is in place at the time,
Yeah.
with a radical economic programme.
Historically, in any case, Liverpool has been a city prone to sectarianism.
Yes.
Throughout history, Protestant and Catholic, but that had faded. That wasn't the problem, but it was a city that had been run by tendencies, groups, sometimes on the right of the Labour Party, sometimes liberals, sometimes on the left of the Labour Party, and a city that had been run with reasonable efficiency, but always with a vested interest grouping in charge. And I think often that militant was simply the latest in a whole series of cadres, of groupings, of ideologically motivated, organised groups wanting to take over the civic governance system.
And what militant and other left-wing groups were able to do, entryist groups that were able to do at that time, was to take advantage of the fact that in places like Liverpool, but other places as well, places like Bermondsey and others, where local Labour parties had been allowed to, well, they were sort of run to keep people out. They were very small. They were dominated by the old guard of the Labour Party. They didn't actually want new members.
I could have taken you to people who would say, when they applied to join the Labour Party, simply out of political enthusiasm, I'm sorry, we're full up. No, it was
because those local parties
absurd.
didn't want new people.
Exactly.
Because they could run it in their own way.
That's right. Yeah.
And so actually, these groups actually found it easy to take over these places because the actual local Labour Party had atrophied and decayed.
Absolutely. I heard Ken Livingstone giving a talk once. He wasn't militant, of course.
But he was on the left of the party.
Well, there were 57 varieties of ultra-left in London, known, generally speaking, as the loony London left. But Ken was very popular in some quarters, and I heard him giving a talk to the Campaign for Labour Party Democracy, explaining the numbers theory. And he said, really, all you need to do in a ward where it's usual for 6 people to turn up regularly is get 7 people to turn up, and you can be a candidate for the council, and in a safe Labour ward, get elected. Now, my point is, it was said with a degree of cynicism, but it was true.
It's just politics, in effect.
Yeah, sure. And I wasn't shocked. I was appalled, but not shocked, if you know what I mean.
And obviously by the time your leader, 1983, militant in control of Liverpool Council, what are they doing? What makes them unusual in Liverpool?
Unusual to the extent that they were taking the strategy of protest and disobedience to the government that bit further than some other councils were doing. I spoke of something called the dented shield, which was a defence of those councils that were sailing close to the wind in terms of their budgets, but nevertheless acting within the law in order to stay in office, not be barred from office, to protect the communities that they represented. In Liverpool, militant were going that bit further by defying the government. They actually got away with it 1 year in 1983. But when 1984 came and the 84-85 financial year, they said that there were no circumstances in which they would try to fix a legal budget within the limits set by the government.
So to be clear, what was happening is that the Conservative government, the Thatcher government, were setting budgets, and in Liverpool's case, they were, and militant controlling them, they were basically refusing to adhere to those budgets. They were basically setting illegal budgets and basically daring the government to take them on.
That's right. And they extended that over a period of several months, coming to the conclusion eventually, they say as a tactic, that they would declare 30,000 of their staff redundant as a way of embarrassing the government into providing them with additional funds. But of course that did mean that literally, in the phrase that I used, they were sending taxis scuttling around the city, handing out redundancy notices to their own workers.
Well, let's listen to, that's probably the most famous part of the speech, and I think it's the bit that still excites people in a way to this day. Let's just listen to what you said about that specific point.
I'll tell you what happens with impossible promises. You start with far-fetched resolutions. They are then pickled into a rigid dogma, a code. And you go through the years sticking to that, outdated, misplaced, irrelevant to the real needs, and you end in the grotesque chaos of a Labour council hiring taxis to scuttle around a city, handing out redundancy notices to its own workers. I'm telling you, no matter how entertaining, how fulfilling the short-term egos, I tell you, and you listen, I'm telling you, you can't play politics with people's jobs and with people's services.
What do you think when you watch that back now, 40 years on?
I wish I hadn't had to do it. That was the feeling I had when I actually made it. But in a sense, of course, that was the easy part, denouncing them. There then followed 8 months, I think, of evidence gathering and of examination of effectively non-legal trial, abiding by the rules of natural justice, where we heard the case of people that I would eventually propose for expulsion.
But to be clear, just on that point of the taxi thing, because I'm sure, particularly to younger listeners, it will sound really odd in a way, and the younger viewers. That's what the council were doing. They were literally, because I think, and is it right because...
And they terrified people.
Because the public sector unions wouldn't actually hand out the notices themselves.
That's right.
The postal workers.
Yes, right.
Hand them
The
out.
General Municipal and Boilermakers Union and the National Union of Public Employees said, we are not going to take these redundancy notices around in order to fulfill your tactical fooling about.
Because what they were doing, and it goes back to when you mentioned Trotsky, without getting too sort of abstract, one of Trotsky's ideas is this idea of transitional demands.
Yes.
So you make demands that are so outrageous. Impossible.
Yeah.
Which, so the theory goes, basically will prove to the workers that the capitalist system cannot deliver for them, and will then lead them to a revolutionary politics.
I can give you perfect instances of resolutions passed at constituency level, trade union level, national conference level, that were utterly impractical. The fulfillment of wild ideals, which, in some ways I could applaud, because theoretically, you could see the purpose of it. But were never, ever going to be accepted or implemented by the Labour Party or the Labour leadership, including me. So then the next thing for the would-be revolutionary to do is to accuse me and the leadership of the party of betrayal, of treachery. So the ultra-left would be succeeding in getting prominence for its proposals, its impossible proposals, and then because rational, sensible, democratic socialists wouldn't have anything to do with the proposals, that they were completely selling out to the capitalist class and betraying the interests of the proletariat.
And they were,
it was pantomime time.
And in order to satisfy that, as you say, they were willing to make a lot of people redundant.
Oh, sure.
To show...
I mean, they insist, they still are insisting, those who survive, that it was only a tactic. It was only to dramatize their condition. They never would have fulfilled the redundancies. But the thing is, they jammed themselves into a corner where if the government didn't provide supplementary funding, and they wouldn't, then they were going to be stuck with redundancy notices that were made valid by the fiscal circumstances.
And how long had you been considering before making the speech, taking it on?
Oh, quite a long time. I would have done it the year before, but 1984, at the time of conference, we were halfway through the miners' strike. And the labour movement, understandably, was utterly preoccupied with the strike, the merits or demerits of the strike, the offences against civil rights taking place in the policing of the strike, the consequences for mining communities, which were devastating, and nobody would have been listening. And even if they had been listening, they wouldn't have responded in the way that you heard on the recording. The Labour Party conference audience did respond. Now, I didn't know that they were going to be responding quite as vociferously, quite as enthusiastically.
You can hear it in the hall.
With huge support. But I knew I had to take the risk. I mean, in a sense, to lead is to take risks.
Why did you feel you had to take the risk?
Well, because the tactics of militant and some others on the ultra-left up and down the country were inflicting dreadful harm on the reputation of the Labour Party. I mean, people, quite sensible people, thoughtful people, were thinking that we were in danger of being taken over if we hadn't already been taken over by a lunatic fringe.
Were people paranoid about it, in the sense of, because of these secret kind of organisations? Were people paranoid about, are you militant, are you not?
I mean, some paranoia is justifiable. I have to say, I didn't suffer from it, but there were colleagues in Parliament whose lives were made hellish by the constant nagging and campaigning of militant people and ultra-left people in their constituency. Perfectly good, hard-working, dedicated members of Parliament, people of talent and integrity, were under terrible pressure, so that they hated the idea of their general constituency meetings, because they would be under perpetual attack.
Were you nervous before making it?
No more than I always was before making speeches. I mean, that might seem strange to you. I do not like speaking in public.
No way.
Well,
but you're amazing.
You've got to do it. Well, there are lots of boxers who don't like boxing, and there are football players who get very uptight before going on the field. So, I mean, you do it. I mean, the only reason that I became leader of the party was because there was nobody else. It was duty.
Because so many had lost their seats in the 83 election.
I mean, it was an utter disaster.
Did you know, Neil, it's, as I say, gone down in a sort of law, in political law, particularly.
Not even the best part of the speech.
No, well, we'll listen to another part of the speech, which I think probably is even better. Did you think this was make or break for you? Did you think that did you have a sense of how momentous this moment was going to be in your leadership?
Oh, I knew that if we didn't do it and follow it through with effective expulsions and the complete transformation of the party in Liverpool and one or two other places, then we were going to drag around this huge lead weight of being misrepresented and misinterpreted for years and years to come.
Because the press were
it had
obsessed
to be
with
done. Had to be done.
Is it true you didn't sleep before?
Oh, I never did, though. I used to write all my conference speeches and quite a lot of other speeches overnight. I stayed up all night.
What, you wrote it the night before?
Yeah, because of the huge diversity of issues that I had to address as leader of the party anyway, and because I'm a lazy sod, I suppose, I never got round to actually composing the speech in a written form until the night before. So about 10:30 on the Monday night before the Labour Party conference, I would get my team of 2 or 3 people together and start to write my conference speech. And there was one occasion, 1986, I recall, when Sue Nye, now Baroness Nye, wonderful woman, brought the last 2 pages of this speech onto the platform after I'd started speaking. That's what they call hitting the deadline.
So did your revisers hadn't read through it?
No.
Really?
No, I mean...
Can you imagine? There's probably no conference speech that's been done like that now for decades. It goes through endless focus groups.
Tony used to worry through the night, but he used to get a couple of hours. But he used to worry and rewrite, rewrite, even though he'd arrived at the conference venue with a drafted speech that they'd been putting together, he and his people had been putting together for weeks before, and then he would rewrite. And he never got a lot of sleep before his conference speech, but he did get some kip. The thing is, I've a serious flaw, amongst many other flaws for me, is I can't use other people's words, you see.
So it's all your own words?
Yeah. Even when I was in the European Commission and obviously had official statements to make and arguments and figures to use, I would take those from my civil servants. I had great people working in my departments, terrific, from all over the European Union. I would take that, but I would then rewrite them. So much so, there's a guy called Wolfgang Elstner, who was a German civil servant, quite a senior manager by the time he finished, who, when I left the transport portfolio, did Guide for Kinnock Speech Drafters. And it's 20 idiotic things, some of which, of course, did reflect my inclinations and tendencies for being infinitive shall not be split, and all kinds of things. You're welcome to see it. It's hanging on my office wall.
Could do with one of those for John Sopel.
Well, I'm sure, yes. Yes. But, yes. I'll tell you a story about John afterwards.
Right. Yeah, I've got a few for you as well.
To his credit, yes. When he was very, very, very young.
Really? Hard to imagine that.
Yes. But, it's daft. I've had great people working for me.
Yeah.
They've drafted speeches which have ended up with other people, and they haven't had to change a word, and they've done it, and people have clapped, and it's been very good.
Your speeches are so good, even Joe Biden decided to take them on, of course.
Yeah, and Gary Hart and a few others. But with attribution, that's the secret.
Yes, yeah. Did you, how did it feel to deliver? I mean, for people who haven't seen it, and people watching this will have watched it, but it's worth going to see, other bits of the speech. I mean, it looks electric. I mean, because you're getting huge support, but you've also got members of militant, people on Liverpool City Council, Derek Hatton there, yes. He was the deputy leader of Liverpool City Council, very famous figure at the time, screaming at you. You've got Eric Heffer, who was a left-wing Labour MP, storming out, as you say that bit. Did you notice that? Could you see them?
Yeah, I could see Eric getting up out of my fringe vision. And I thought, because we'd had some previous confrontations, that he might try to hit me.
On the stage?
Yeah, I mean, he was absolutely raging mad with me. He was absolutely outraged, which is why he walked out. And because of our previous history, I thought he might try to clip me as he goes past.
What, live? Like lamp you around
Oh
the
yeah,
face?
yeah. It was that kind of occasion. So I got my feet in the right position consciously while I was speaking.
That was going through your head at that
Yeah,
time?
so if he'd taken a swing at me, he would have missed. Anyway.
What would you have done back?
Well, it depends on whether he tried again. But anyway, that would...
Lamped him back?
Well, yeah. I mean, in order to prevent him from making the same mistake again. But it didn't come to that. And it was only flashing across my mind, this silly sod is going to take a swing at me, which he didn't, fortunately. He was much too sensible in the end. But he was completely aflame with anger. And he walked out. I could not believe my luck as I reflected afterwards that Hatton and Mulhern and the other ones were standing up and shouting at me. You can't really anticipate what the reception is going to be.
Why? Because it made them look frenzied
It was terrific. I could say, I'll tell you and you listen. Which in a sense, obviously without any form of rehearsal or anything, or anticipation, made the speech, dramatized it. So it got, it would have got a lot of notice, but it got even more notice than I anticipated.
Do you think, I mean, as you say, people like Heffer, the left, that part of the left, I mean, they did come to loathe you, viscerally.
Eric
Why?
Heffer said to me, and we'd previously been, well, not close comrades, but, friendly. He tragically contracted an incurable form of cancer, and he was dying. And the Speaker of the House of Commons put in a reception for him in deference to his record as a parliamentarian. And so Glenys, my wife, and I went, and he was there with Doris, his wife. And we after 3/4 of an hour or so, we left. So I went up to Doris to say goodnight to her, and she said goodnight. And I shook his hand, and I said, "Good night, Eric, all the best." And he said, "I wish you were dying instead of me." Which, yeah, the guy was telling me the truth. But that's how bitter things had become.
Right till the end.
Yeah, I understood what he was saying and how difficult it was for him to handle the reality that he was. I think he lived for about 6-7 months after that.
How did that make you feel?
Awful. You can't feel anything but awful when somebody says that to you, partly because you are repelled by it. It's a real punch in the middle of the eyes. But also, you comprehend the grief, the desperate grief. If you're an adult, certainly if you're an adult with the breadth of engagement that I've had with people of all kinds, you encounter a lot of death. Some of it violent death. I've had friends who've been murdered. Olaf Palme, the Prime Minister of Sweden, Joe Cox, Anna Lindh, the Foreign Minister of Sweden, was a great friend of mine, and others who've been murdered. And so you comprehend violent death, but also the agony of incurable disease. But even with that background, Eric's response action came as a difficult to manage moment.
I can imagine. Why do you think they loathed you so much? I mean, yes, you took them on, but it didn't necessarily need to lead to that level of...
No,
is it because they thought that you were their person? Because they thought you were on the left?
No, they'd never voted for me.
No.
In fact, Eric Heffer ran against
me. You, yes.
And he ran against Roy Hattersley when Tony Benn ran against me in '88. So that grouping in the parliamentary party, which was by the time we finished very, very small, and in the party generally, had never voted for me, which was okay as far as I'm concerned. But they detested me, I think, because I attacked them from the left. I told them that they were betraying the interests of democratic socialism by not making the effort to appeal to a breadth of the British electorate. And, you know, I used to say things to them like, not sort of sit them down, look them in the face and say it, but in meetings where I knew that they were in the audience or on the platform listening, things like, only people with shallow convictions are afraid of compromise. People with deep convictions are not afraid of compromise because they realize that incrementally, that's how you make progress. And so if you're serious about trying to secure support for a democratic socialist society, you will not be afraid to make compromises. But, you know, they'd struck this posture of purity. And of course, for the pure, it's very difficult to compromise, especially when they're afraid of diluting their purity if they make a compromise.
Well, as you say, it wasn't even, as you say, the best part of the speech. In a way, some of those themes, you reflected later on about what Labour had done for you.
Yes.
Brothers like you. Let's just listen to a bit of that part of the speech.
Because I owe this party everything I've got, not the job, not being leader of the Labour Party. I owe this party every life chance I've had from the time I was a child. A life chance. The life chance of a comfortable home with working parents, people who had jobs, a life chance of moving out of a pest and damp infested set of rooms into a decent home built by a Labour council under a Labour government. The life chance of an education that went on for as long as I wanted to take it. Me and millions of others of my generation got all their chances from this movement. That's what... We've got to win. Not for our sakes, but really, truly, to deliver the British people from evil. Let's do it.
Yeah. I was just looking there at the sourness of Joan Maynard and Dennis Skinner sitting immediately behind me, who were devotees of Ben and Heifer, but over my left shoulder, my wife.
Glynis.
Yeah.
You lost a few years ago.
Yeah.
What did she think of the speech? Do you remember?
By custom, after the leader's speech, we went back to our suite in the hotel. Leaders have a suite.
Very nice, of course, rightly so.
With a lot of mates there from the constituency and friends, trade union movement, journalists. Dickie Attenborough was there. You know, lots of friends from film and the theatre and so on. And all having a drink. And she came up to me. Give me a kiss. And she said, "Oh, I'm glad you got that out of your system."
And you had got it out of your system.
Yeah.
And it was a turning point. It was a turning point for the Labour Party, for
Well,
sure.
so they say, yeah.
You think it was, when you look back?
I guess at the time it was, but manifestly not enough. We still had a long way to go. And actually, it took another 12 years after that to get Tony Blair into government with a huge majority. So...
Did he ever say anything to you about that speech?
Oh, yeah, he's always been very kind about it, yeah.
I suppose he probably thinks it was a key
Yes.
stepping stone to his own victory in '97.
Yeah, I mean, he said quite frequently...
He must have been in the hall, I assume?
He
was an MP by then. He was
an MP, yes. He'd been an MP
in '83,
for 2 years then.
yeah.
Yeah, he was in the hall. Gordon was there, obviously. And, you know, Tony said afterwards, when he became Prime Minister, very generously, said he couldn't have done what he did if I hadn't done what I did. So, you know, that's a degree of compensation.
Do you you were talking before you came in, saying that you've just been doing a talk at a school, and one of the questions was why it is the left has so much more tendency to kind of fragment and to be divided than the right. And obviously what you were doing in that speech was taking on some of that fragmentation and that division. I wonder, do you think that's still true on the right? I mean, in a way, the right in British politics now is becoming more radicalised.
Yes,
and you see a lot...
Yes.
I wonder, do you see a lot of some of the tendencies that you saw then on the left, on the right today? A lot of those same hallmarks?
Well, there's several parallels. And this is the point I made when I was answering these very smart youngsters who were questioning me. I mean, the frequency of division on the left is because on the left of politics, everywhere in the world, there are idealists and ideologues. And there is always an element of people, always, hopefully not in a majority making decisions, but they always exist, who want victory in a democracy on their terms. And of course, in a democracy, you can't do that. You can get some of what you want, but you get victory on the terms set by the electorate, not decided beforehand by some all-wise, brilliant junta of political geniuses. So then you get in the divergences and arguments of ideals and ideologues, tacticians and strategists, the divisions that go with it. I've never really come to terms with it, but that's the reason for it. On the right, because they represent vested interests, generally speaking, they are more disciplined. I wouldn't say cohesive, but disciplined. So that under pressure, they tend to stand shoulder to shoulder, face outward and fix bayonets, which is one of the reasons why the Tory party has ruled for most of the last century and more, because they're much more disciplined. It isn't that they don't have disagreements, but they've been more... Now, what's happened in our generation, in this century, is Conservatives in defeat, smashed in 1997, after 18 years in government, wandered around bewildered for a bit, then thought they should move radically to the right, and they picked Ian Duncan Smith. They then had to get Michael Howard in to repair the damage. Then they picked nice Mr. Cameron, who looked like, sounded like, echoed in some ways Tony Blair. And they eventually got a coalition with the Liberals. Since that time, they've deluded themselves, as some on the ultra-left always had, that if they only changed the leadership, their fortunes would be transformed. And in the history of the Conservative Party, of course, there's never been the repetitive change of leader that we've seen in the last, 9 years, since the Brexit referendum. And there are errors now being made by the right, which failed to satisfy the public desire for real change.
Well-
And superficially, and I hope temporarily, that desire for change is articulated by Reform, who, of course, are not a change party. They're very much the same party, but they sound as if they want a significant change.
How do you think Starmer's dealing with Farage?
He made a very, very good speech last week.
Well, how do you think it ranks his conference? We were talking about your conference speech in '85.
Oh,
What did you make of his in
It's
2025?
Keir's best conference speech.
You think?
Yeah, and his heart and soul were in it. The trouble is, and I'm sure he would agree, I haven't been in touch with him other than to say, well done, which I'm not patronising him. It's important that people know when they've done well. I'm very much in favour of giving essay writers A's when they've really tried and done the homework. But I'd give Keir an A+ for that speech. But I'm sure he would take the view, as certainly I do, it's a pity he had to make it. But it was necessary for the Prime Minister to punch down on this occasion. It shouldn't be overdone. And he had to make it because of the false reputation that Reform is building. And the leader of the Labour Party needed to offer his view of their shallowness and their illusions and their dishonesty, which he did in very fine form.
Do you think that he was right to say that Farage's policy is racist? Do you think Farage
Policies are?
Do you think Farage is a racist?
I don't know if Farage is racist. Only he could answer it, and you're unlikely to get other than some kind of slithering response. But
what do you make of him as a politician? Do you think he's formidable?
he's a man of his age. We live in the age of celebrity, and he's managed, and I guess it's to his credit really as an operator, to make himself a celebrity. On investigation, of course, the bottom comes out. I mean, I'll give you a precise example. Back in July, the end of July, he goes to South Wales, makes a speech saying he wants to reindustrialise South Wales. Fine, okay, I couldn't disagree with that, except that the reindustrialisation that I would suggest is investment in the development of green energy and green manufacturing. And Wales is wide open for that and is already undertaking some of that. I hope it can be a lot more because our fortunes need restoring. But his way of reindustrialising was to say he wanted to reopen the coal mines and restart the blast furnaces. Anybody who knows anything about coal and steel, and this includes most of the people living in South Wales, knows you can't reopen a coal mine and you can't restart a blast furnace. You can build new ones, you can dig new mines, but you can't reopen them. And so, in the sweep of his oratory, if you can call it that, he was really offering an utter fiction to the people of South Wales. When he was asked by a young woman journalist whether that was practical, he said, I quote him, "There were aspirations and anything's achievable with the right mindset." And so everything he'd said in the previous 20 minutes came to pieces.
Do you think he's dangerous? Some Labour MPs have described him as a dangerous figure. Do you think he's dangerous?
He's dangerous in the sense that he offers illusions. I mean, his ideas on resolving or managing immigration by gigantic scale repatriation is just, on any examination, empty. Repatriation of whom, to where, by what means. And so what might ring a bell in headline terms turns to ashes the moment that it's matched against reality.
Do you think that Starmer's government is being sufficiently radical in its thinking to take him on, though? You've talked before about the idea of a wealth tax and other things.
Sure, but
do you think he's
well,
been radical
I've
enough?
talked about asset taxes. Right? We can
But
talk
you know
about
what I
that
mean.
if you want to. But look, as I've said many times before, Farage and reform will only be defeated by achievement in government, practical things that people can see to be beneficial, like cutting the waiting lists and developing the health services, like investing in skills and new training, like building houses, like restoring infrastructure and supporting communities, giving people back pride in where they're from and where they live, and seeing that, demonstrating in very, very practical, tangible terms that they are not left behind. That's the main way it has to be done and will be done. It's very gradually starting. And the other way is to get articulate politicians who will examine very thoroughly what reform is, not just who they are, but what it is, who they've associated with, what they've said, policies that they've adopted, and expose them to the light.
I just wonder whether you think, I don't know if you've heard what Robert Jenrick has said this week or today about, or he was recorded as saying, talking about that he was in Handsworth and, he didn't see a white face and that was a sign of poor integration. He then says, it wasn't about race, whatever. But we see more and more of this sort of stuff. We see more and more. It feels like politics is moving very quickly in a particular direction.
It's a swirl. It's a maelstrom, politics at the moment. And it's very, very difficult for people with the obligations and responsibilities of office, like a government.
Doesn't it feel like politics is galloping to the right, despite the fact we have a Labour government?
No, not really. See, what we're seeing is galloping grievance. People, I encounter people everywhere who are really, really brassed off. Now, some people are brassed off because of this tendency towards, for want of a better phrase, the right. A lot of other people are brassed off because they really think that with justification, that they've been left behind, that their hopes and aspirations are being neglected. I mean, you talk to a young couple who want to buy a house. My wife and I in 1967 moved into our relatively new, or 5-year-old, 3-bedroom, semi-detached house with a garden back in front and a garage on the Monday after we were married. Our house. We had a mortgage, obviously, but we never had any doubt while we were graduating that we were going to be able to get married and buy a house. How many young couples can do that now? So when you're in that situation, and I'm only giving that as an instance of the difficulty of having realistic aspiration, hope that can be fulfilled.
And yet it seems to be the reform are the ones who are managing to speak to that grievance so effectively. For example, we know
they're offering very, very simplistic responses, never answers to immensely complex problems.
But for example, in part of the country, best, that you're from Wales, from South Wales, Reform doing really, really well. A suggestion that Labour could come 3rd or 4th in the Senate elections next year. Do you think if that were to happen, Keir Starmer his leadership would be under threat?
I'm not going to even guess about that. Partly because of Maelstrom, the swirl. Anybody will give you or pretend to offer you an accurate estimate of the outcome next May in Wales, in Scotland, in local elections.
It'd be a body blow, though, given how successful Labour has been in Wales for a century. It would be a body blow, wouldn't it?
Quite. That's part of the reason for a degree of difficulty now. We've been the majority political representatives of Wales for a century, indeed over a century, 101 years, I think. Now, in some quarters, of course, that could produce complacency. The party in Wales has stayed sufficiently awake not to become complacent, take things for granted. But of course, if you've been there a long time, the assumption by parts of the electorate will always be, for reasons I understand, that they are being taken for granted. And occasionally, they'll want to stick you in the eye with a very sharp stick. And there's some of that. But, I mean, I've got a lot of faith in the current leadership of the party in Wales. Eluned Morgan, she's a dear, dear friend. She's doing the job out of total commitment and duty to Wales and to the Labour Party. And I hope that will come through with increasing illumination over these coming months.
Would you, you know a thing or two about deputy leadership elections? Do you, and divisive ones? Are you backing a candidate in this one?
Oh, yeah. I'm backing Lucy Powell.
Lucy Powell?
Yeah, that's public knowledge.
Why is that?
Well, I mean, apart from anything else, she's been a very good friend and comrade for over 20 years, since she was a kid. But she's also a highly intelligent woman with a very practical turn of mind. She wants to solve problems.
Is there a danger that having a deputy leader outside the cabinet might be rather unstable?
No, and this is not a divisive deputy leadership election. When you think of some that we've had.
Well, yes.
This is the height of moderation and politeness.
Would you like to see Angela Rayner back in the cabinet?
She will be at some stage.
Do you think
she's a very capable woman.
Do you think she was a victim of classism? That's what some people said.
I guess so, but what did for her is that she inadvertently got her tax position wrong. And so I guess in these days she had no alternative but to resign.
Just one final thing. We're looking back on that speech. It was 40 years ago. I know you say you didn't like doing it, Neil, but remarkable really, because it is a remarkable example of political oratory. We don't really get that sort of thing that much these days. Do you think that's a problem?
Well, I think I might be partly to blame for that in a funny kind of way.
Really?
Well, I got such a belting for being the Welsh windbag because to a degree in the tradition of some Welsh people, some Scots, some Yorkshire people, I've always been willing to use colourful language in order to paint pictures in making a political argument. I say that in my own defence. Nobody else is going to defend me, so I might as well. Anyway, that gave me a very bad name. And what was worse, and probably true, was for much of the time that I was leader of the party, I couldn't afford to say what I really meant because I was in the process of making huge changes in policy. And if I'd rehearsed those arguments too publicly, too early, then the opponents of change would have organised against me. So sometimes I had to use long, tortured answers, too many words, in order to evade the question. And it got on my nerves, and I think it got on the nerves of discerning public. So maybe there was something in the Welsh windbag, but I was employing it as a tactical necessity. And I think what's happened is people who've got the capability of being fluent and articulate and respecting their audiences enough to want to bring them into the argument have been frightened to use the colourful language in case they attracted the criticism I did.
Were you not sat there watching Keir's speech last week going, oh, come on, Keir, give it a bit of welly. Give it some of the Kinnockonian kind of welly.
No, but if you've got to do that, it's no damn good. It's got to be the absolute straight, authentic article. If you're pretending, forget it. Sit down and shut up. Because your audience, if there's anything to them, they will smell it. There's no good saying, I'm going to give it some welly today. You either get up and say what you mean, or you shut up.
Okay, thanks so much.
Thank you.
An absolute pleasure.
The Newsagents. This is a Global Player original podcast.